What's going on, Nets fans? So the season is over. Well, for us at least, not the NBA season. If I told you I thought we were going to make the playoffs this year, I'd be lying to you. So we finished with 28 wins, and I'm pretty sure, based off the last 2 years, that's an improvement for both years. But there were some disappointments, some upsides this year, and I'm just going to go over each player and kind of give like my pros and cons and like a grade for how I think they did this year. So let's get into it. So I'm going in alphabetical order here. So let's start with Quincy Acey. And I didn't expect much coming into the season from Quincy. He actually surprised me a bit. I mean, I love his energy. I think he gives a lot of effort, and he could be a good three-point shooter sometimes. I mean, the problem with him was the inconsistency, and it's not really his fault, this part, but he was asked to play a lot of center for this team, and he's just too undersized. At 6'7" and 240. So I think, I don't know what kind of future he has with this team, and there's not much of a high ceiling for Quincy in the future, but I like having guys like him, guys that bring energy, and guys that can kind of get in the opponent's heads. And we saw him get Andre Drummond ejected late in the season, so stuff like that can really make you like a player. So Quincy, he was alright. I'll give him a C, and I'd like to see him back next year. This man I have to give a lot of praise. Jarrett Allen, 19 years old. He was drafted in the first round by us, and honestly, when we took him, I wasn't really too familiar with him, but I watched his highlights and I saw his length and everything, and I was like, wow, this kid could really be something special. But I didn't really think he would turn out to be anything this year. As I said, he's 19 years old, and he's not really fully developed into his body. I expect him to put more muscle on and whatnot, but he really surprised me and probably surprised everybody. He was a presence on the inside defensively. He was a pretty good finisher. He has a smooth-looking jump shot at the foul line. He was pretty solid, and he even made a few three-pointers this year. So I think as long as Jarrett Allen just grows into his body and keeps improving every year, the ceiling is really high for him, and I'm really excited about that. It was a good pick by Sean Marks, and I think I have to give him an A-. I didn't expect anything from him. As I said, I think he could have started in the G League this year. I did not think he was a lock to make the team, but obviously that was the right decision. So I think as long as Jarrett keeps developing his body and working on his craft, he'll be probably one of the top 10 centers in the league pretty soon. So I'm really excited for this kid. On to DeMarre Carroll, and I'm going to be brutally honest. I mean, I like to be honest on this channel. I like to just, I don't like to be a hypocrite about things. So when we made the DeMarre Carroll trade, I was like, what the hell are we doing? Like, I never liked Carroll's game, watching him with Atlanta, watching him with the Raptors and that terrible season he had. But they considered him a salary dump or whatever they wanted to call him because he signed a pretty big contract, and the Nets were able to take it on and get a first-round pick back from the Raptors, which obviously isn't a high pick, but hey, it's still a first-round pick. So basically what we did was we traded some no-name, I forget who it was, and got a first-rounder and got DeMarre back. So DeMarre scored 13.5 points this year and was a really solid option for us. He started most of the year, was a great perimeter shooter for us, and brought a lot of leadership. But the problem with him is his age, limited upside at this point. But he was a guy that, it seemed like everyone liked him. I expect him to be back with the team next year. And, unless there's a contender that, wants to trade for him, which is a possibility. But DeMarre Carroll, he really changed my mind. When you watch him for a full season, he really is a solid player. And the trade was a good move by Sean Marks. Props to him for that. On to Allen Crabbe, and it's funny looking at Crabbe's whole journey with coming to the Nets. I mean, if you follow the Nets in the offseason, you would know that he signed a pretty big contract with us, and the Blazers ended up matching it. He played a season in Portland. I guess they didn't really like the development, and they traded him the next year to the Nets, and the Nets still have to take on that contract, of course, but I think they traded what the hell is his name? I forget who they traded, honestly. Whoever they traded for, they cut him right after. So basically, it was just the Nets taking on Allen Crabbe's salary. And, we knew Crabbe was a really good shooter, a catch-and-shoot type of guy, but they figured with a bigger role that maybe he can become something more. And the first month or two of the season, it wasn't looking like Crabbe was going to be anything special, but towards the end, he really turned it on. I mean, he had some really blow-up games. He scored something in the mid-30s. He scored 41 towards the end of the season. And I really liked what I saw from him. I mean, you could see he improved defensively. He's a game changer at times. If he gets hot, he can change an entire game and can, demand a lot of attention from a defense if he's shooting the ball well. So, I think Allen Crabbe was a good pickup. He obviously makes a little bit too much for for what he produces, but you know, he's only like 26 years old, I believe, just turned 26, so he still has room to grow, and I'm excited to see what he can be. Needs to improve the defense, the ball handling a little bit, but he could be a really good player for us, and that was another good move. I like that one. Spencer Dinwiddie, what a story this guy was this year. I mean, he was like one of those needle in a haystack type of players. I think he was drafted by Detroit and was in the D League at the time and was brought on by us towards the end of last year, I believe. And he was, you know, he was all right. I mean, I wasn't really in love with his game last year, and he came in this year like a completely different person. He looked really confident. His jump shot looked a lot better. And, you know, at the time when D'Angelo Russell was injured for, I think, like a month and a half, 2 months, whenever it was, he was really like the juggernaut of this team. And he obviously went to the skills competition All-Star Weekend and won that, you know, repping the Nets. It was nice to see. I don't think anyone's won that since Jason Kidd for us. But it was really good to see Spencer develop into a great player. He's still under contract for, I think, a couple of years and not much money, so we have control over him now. It's interesting if they're going to trade him or not. I think if the Nets get like a middle first-round pick for him, I think it might be worth it, but it'd be interesting to see how that plays out because him and D'Lo did not really play well together. So, I mean, if they do get a good pick for Spencer, I would not be shocked if they dealt him, but as for now, I'm just really excited for him, and if he keeps improving, he's going to be one of the, you know, one of the best players on this team and a really solid point guard overall. Joe Harris is another one of those guys that I really did not expect much from, but he proved me wrong as well. He averaged over 10 points a game this year, and by the end of the year, he ended up being one of my favorite players on this team. I mean, he moves so well without the ball. If you just watch him on the court, he's always in the right spot, great spot-up shooter, and he can get hot, just like Alan Crabbe. He can change a game. He demands a lot of attention. I said a problem with him is like limited upside. Like Joe Harris is never going to be an all-star, but you need solid role players in this league to win. And maybe the Nets have a little bit of too much of role players, but Joe Harris is a solid player overall. But just like Spencer Dinwiddie, I would not be shocked if he was traded. I hope he's not because I really like Joe Harris. But you know, it's a possibility based off the contract he has. I'm pretty sure he has to re-sign with us first, so I guess currently he's a free agent. I don't know if he's restricted or unrestricted, but you know, hopefully he's back next year for a decent price, and you know, he could improve. You know, he's still pretty young, so you know, let's see what Joe Harris has for us next year, hopefully in a Brooklyn Nets uniform. RONDAE Hollis-Jefferson, you could see a lot of improvement in his game from previous years. He always had that like bad hitch in his jump shot, and he still has it to an extent, but it's not nearly as bad as it once was. He was able to face up from mid-range and hit shots pretty consistently. You know, he pretty much scored 14 points a game this year. He's undersized for his position. He made like a permanent switch to the 4 this year, but it seems like there's no positions in the NBA nowadays anyway. But you know, he's asked to guard players that are a lot bigger than him, but he brings a lot of toughness and energy, which you really appreciate. So RONDAE is still pretty young, and he definitely has room to grow. So, I mean, as long as he continues on that pace and, you know, just keeps working, I think he can be even better. On to Caris LeVert, and Caris is a really tricky player to, like, identify. I mean, I like him a lot, but, you know, there were games when you would come away saying, wow, Caris LeVert is, you know, he's going to be a future star in this league. And then there were games where you're like, wow, is Caris LeVert even active? Like, you know, it was weird seeing the inconsistency from him, but there were times where you watch him and you're like, wow, this guy can really be something one day. You know, he did improve from the first year. He missed, you know, I think 2 years ago at this point, he missed some games with a foot injury. This was like his first full season. He's definitely athletic, definitely knows how to score in isolation. But as I said, he needs more consistency. He can't get lost in games. I mean, he needs to be one of the best players on this team. And I think he does have that ceiling. He just needs to grow into it a bit and, you know, just make smarter decisions. I mean, we've seen him take some ill-advised shots and make some bad passes. But, you know, I'm really optimistic about LeVert and that he can grow into something special. He definitely has tools for it. And he seems like a good kid. So hopefully he, you know, becomes a player that we expect him to be. On to D'Angelo Russell, and all eyes were on him this year after the Nets traded longtime center Brook Lopez to the Lakers in exchange for D'Angelo. D'Angelo is still very young, only barely 22 years old at this point. And, you know, there were some games where you watch D'Angelo and you're like, wow, this guy could really be something great. He has a little James Harden in him. He might be like a poor man's James Harden one day, which would still be a pretty damn good player. But there were times where you watched D'Angelo and he would do some of the dumbest things, like just turn the ball over late. And, you know, we would see him benched late in games, and Spencer Dinwiddie would end up being the point guard. But there were also times when you watch Russell and you're like, damn, this guy can really take over a game. So as long as we get that consistent D'Angelo that's doing good things, I'm really excited for what he could be. I mean, he's definitely like a modern-day type point guard, runs the pick and roll really well, has tremendous vision. We've seen some passes from D'Angelo that were just ridiculous. And basically, I mean, he just needs to grow a bit and just needs to, you know, become more mature. And it's, you know, it's just basically he needs to play more and just, you know, become more adequate to playing in the NBA. And I think he'll eventually be a star in this league. He's moving in the right direction. Did have an injury this year that held him back a bit, but as long as he can stay healthy, I'm really optimistic for D'Angelo and his future with this team. JAHLIL OKAFOR. Now let me first say that I am not against the trade that Sean Marks made for JAHLIL OKAFOR. I would have done it myself. Basically, you had to trade Trevor Booker, who I believe was an expiring contract, had no future with this team, and although I did really like Trevor Booker, he basically was Quincy Acey. I mean, let's just be honest. We already had that Quincy Acey, so why not trade for a guy who I believe was like the 2nd or 3rd overall pick the same year that D'Angelo came out, so I guess he was a 3rd overall pick with Philadelphia, obviously. Very young player. He's really talented offensively. You see him like in a post offense, really good. I think he would win a lot of one-on-one battles in the post, but when it comes to just fitting into the flow of a game, he just did not fit with this team and the way that Kenny Atkinson runs things. You know, he was a defensive liability, had a really bad plus-minus this year, and plus-minus is kind of stupid, but, you know, it does tell a little bit of something. I mean, we saw the players next to him in that category who were not good players at all, so that can tell you a little something. You know, hopefully JAHLIL OKAFOR finds a home and become something in this league. You know, I don't think he's going to be a superstar, but, you know, it's sad to see someone drafted so high and, you know, really struggling in the league. So, and of course, we got to grade the coach. I'll give Kenny Atkinson a B for this year. There were some things I liked and some things that I would scratch my head about. I mean, some of the rotations he would make at the end of the games and the people he would sub in, I wasn't really a big fan of. I felt like he left some people in too long and left some people out too long. I mean, there would be games where Dinwiddie would be on fire and you would see him on the bench late in games. You're like, what the hell are you doing? But, you know, given the talent that Kenny was given, I think he did a really good job. The Nets had that one rough streak of losing, I think, 11 out of 12 games, and people were calling for Atkinson to be fired, which is just ridiculous. But, I mean, Atkinson he's running his offense, which is basically just a spread offense, looking for the best shot, shoot a lot of three-pointers. And the Nets have a decent team built for that, but not a ton of talent. So, I mean, if you gave Kenny Atkinson a good team, I mean, let's just say Atkinson and Mike D'Antoni switched places, and he was coaching the Rockets. I mean, who's to say that Atkinson couldn't lead them to 65 wins or whatever they had this year? I mean, I think he's built to coach a specific type of team with shooters and a superstar, and they're hoping that D'Angelo Russell can turn into that James Harden. And, you know, maybe the Nets turn into the Rockets in, you know, a few years. That's what everyone would hope for. But, you know, I think Atkinson is the right coach for this team right now. The Nets have had so many coaches the last 5 or 6 years. It's unbelievable. So, I mean, you got to give a guy a little time. I think Atkinson has a pretty big window. I'll give him like 5 years and see what happens. So, that was my overall impression of the Nets this year. And it was a little disappointing, not going to lie. I mean, I was hoping to get to 30 games. We just fell short of it. But we're improving every year at this point, and that's really all you want to see as a fan. We were given a tough situation after the whole Billy King trading our first-round picks to the Celtics. I believe next year we finally have our own first-round pick, so that's great news. And, you know, I think we're moving in the right direction, so we just have to be patient. And hopefully the Nets keep improving. And, you know, once we get towards the draft and free agency and whatnot, I'll make a video about the Nets. And, you know, hopefully next year we'll have a better roster and get to that 30-win mark and maybe sneak into the playoffs. So that's about it. If you have any impressions of the Nets this year, please leave a comment. I love talking about the Nets and stuff. There's not many of us Nets fans out there, but if you are, I love discussing this kind of stuff. So thanks for watching.